Hello everybody, it's May 10th, 2020, and it's Mother's Day, and today I want to honor and thank publicly my mother. She has always been the #1 supporter of my life and made a lot of sacrifices for me. She has taken me to many places. When she first heard that I needed to be tested for my speech, she went right away, and I was subsequently diagnosed with a speech delay. If that never happened, I'm not sure if I would talk how I talk now. Likewise, when I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is a mild form of autism, back in circa 2001, she was there with me every step of the way growing up, and again, one of my biggest supporters. Back around the early 80s, she heard about Royal Rangers at her church, and she was the only person in the household that regularly went to church and had to walk a couple of blocks just to get to it. But she went to church often, heard about Royal Rangers. Between a decade or two later, I was born, and she remembered the program and had a friend of hers research, like, if there's an outpost nearby, and she found the one at Newport Mesa Church, Outpost 33. And I was brought up in the program from kindergarten to the present day. I earned the Gold Medal of Achievement, which is equivalent to the rank of Eagle Scout, on September 8th, 2013. I immediately became a commander because that program had changed my life, and I was a commander for the past 7 years, in Royal Rangers the past 20 years. I enjoy every bit of it. I don't know where I would be without Royal Rangers. In fact, the first 2 chapters of my book are about Royal Rangers. In the early 90s, she met Johnny Erickson Tata, and from going on a radio program that featured Johnny, she met Tom and Ginny Carr in Fullerton, and as a result, I got to know Tom and Ginny Carr, and I was very intrigued with the piano that they had, and because of that, I learned how to play piano. Tom and Ginny paid for the after-school program at my school, and I started to take lessons, just basic lessons, and then nearly everything else was self-taught. And I don't know where I would be today without playing piano or keyboard. And I would say that she prophesied over me a couple of times. As I grew up, playing piano and self-teaching myself, I always admitted to myself that I don't really play like a lot of piano players do, and it was sort of discouraging, but I still kept at it. And we would always listen to a piano player from my mom's old church back in the 80s, the same church where she first heard of Royal Rangers. And there were cassette tapes that she got from the piano player over there, and he played extremely good. And one day, all of a sudden, on the way to church, I believe, my mom said, "You're going to play like that one day." And I'm like, "Thanks. Yeah, right." I wish, hopefully one day, but that was over 10 years ago, and I believe that I play, maybe not as good as he, but that I do play a lot better than I was before, and that just comes from perseverance and not giving up and such. Another time that I believe my mom prophesied over me is that we once saw like a live book launch on television, and at the end of the speech, the author went to another room and sat at a desk, and a whole line of people followed her for a book signing. And my mom said, "You're going to have that one day. You're going to have a book signing one day." And here I am today, the royalty published author of a book, long story short, literally. And I believe one day, probably thousands of times, I'll be having tons of book signings in the future. So anyway, if I were to express my thankfulness and tell everything that my mom has done and all the wonderful places that we've went to together and done together with family, I would literally have a video that would probably last maybe 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 hours. I would probably, if I were to write it down in another book, a library couldn't fill it. So thank you, Mom. I love you, Mom, and you're the best mother a son could ever ask for. Happy Mother's Day.